Welcome, everyone. I am here to talk about one of the most critical skills you'll develop in your career, publishing your research. This course is called Publish with Confidence because that's exactly what I want you to achieve. I want to take the mystery and the fear out of the academic publishing process. Think of this not as a dry lecture, but as a comprehensive 10-hour mentorship program. I am going to walk you through the entire journey, from the moment you finish your experiments to the day your paper is officially published. I am focusing specifically on mastering that first academic manuscript. Why the first one? Because it sets the tone for your entire career. Once you successfully navigate this process, every subsequent paper becomes easier. I will give you the strategies, the checklists, and the insider knowledge you need to move from manuscript preparation to published success with absolute confidence. Let's look at how we've structured this journey. So, how will I help you master this journey? I have broken the entire publication process down into 8 distinct modules, covering everything you need to know. I start with the foundations, making sure you understand the landscape before you even start writing. Then, I move us into the practical skills of manuscript writing and the critical strategic step of journal selection. Once you have a manuscript and a target, I guide you through the submission process. The middle modules are arguably the most important. I show you how to navigate peer review and develop a bulletproof response strategy to feedback. And because rejection is a reality, I dedicate a module to building resilience. Finally, I wrap up by discussing how to maximize your publication impact. Each module builds on the last, giving you a clear, step-by-step roadmap. This isn't just theory, it's a practical guide designed to increase your success rate immediately. Now, why should you invest this time in learning these skills? We've all heard the phrase, publish or perish. But let's reframe that. Publishing is about building. Publishing your first paper is not just an administrative task, it is a critical career milestone. Academic publications are truly the currency of STEM careers. They are what grant committees, hiring managers, and tenure committees use to measure your value. Your first publication is the key that opens the door to your next opportunity, whether that's a better postdoc, a faculty position, or a high-level industry role. The process often feels opaque, like a secret club, but this course removes the mystery entirely. We're giving you the playbook. You'll walk away with the confidence, the skills, and a clear roadmap, and that proper guidance dramatically increases your chances of success right out of the gate. So let's dive into the first section of that roadmap. We are starting with Module 1, Introduction and Foundations. We'll spend the next hour laying the groundwork for everything else we cover. We need to start by understanding the why before we get to the how. This module focuses on 3 key areas. First, we'll clearly define why publishing is so essential for your career progression. Second, we'll start navigating the complex journal landscape, which can feel overwhelming at first. And third, we'll begin developing a strategic publication plan. By the end of this hour, you'll have absolute clarity on your publication goals and a solid strategy for selecting the right journal for your work. Let's begin by looking at the fundamental role publications play in a STEM career. Publications are not just a nice-to-have, they are the absolute foundation of a STEM career. Think about it, why do we do research? To advance the field. Publications are the mechanism for the dissemination of knowledge, moving science forward for everyone. They are also the primary tangible metric for your productivity and impact. You can't just say you did great work, you have to show it through a consistent publication record. This record is directly tied to your career progression. For many of you, PhD completion strictly requires published or accepted work. If you're aiming for academic roles, postdocs and faculty positions prioritize publication history above almost all other criteria. Even in industry R&D, publications demonstrate expertise and problem-solving skills that employers highly value. This foundation is non-negotiable. But this need for publications doesn't stop once you get your first job. We just established that publications are the currency of a STEM career. But how does that currency change value as you move through the system? This slide shows us that publications aren't just a one-time hurdle, they are a continuous, evolving requirement. For PhD students, it's about checking that box for graduation and getting your foot in the door for a postdoc. That first paper is a license to practice. Once you hit the postdoc stage, the game changes. You need to demonstrate independence and leadership, showing you can drive a project from start to finish without constant supervision. Then, for early career faculty, publications become the primary metric for tenure and promotion. No papers, no tenure. It's that simple. Even in industry, your publication record establishes your credibility and documents your intellectual property. So, regardless of where you are, your publication strategy needs to align with your career stage. You can't use a PhD student's strategy as a tenured professor. Now that we understand why we publish, let's look at where we publish. So, where exactly does your research fit in the vast world of academic publishing? The journal ecosystem is huge, and we need to understand its geography. We can categorize journals by their scope. You have the broad scope journals like Nature and Science, which are multidisciplinary and reach the widest audience. They are high risk, high reward. Then you have field-specific journals, which target your disciplinary community, like a journal dedicated only to organic chemistry. Finally, specialty journals focus on a very narrow, niche research area. We also categorize journals by access. Open access journals remove subscription barriers, meaning anyone can read your work, which often increases visibility. Hybrid journals offer both subscription and open access options, usually for a fee. Each of these journal types serves a different strategic purpose. You need to decide if you want broad visibility or deep engagement within your niche. Understanding this landscape is the first step in strategic journal selection. But how do we measure the quality of these journals? We can't talk about journal selection without talking about metrics. The impact factor is probably the one you hear about most often. It's simply the average number of times articles published in the last 2 years were cited. It's a quick way to gauge a journal's prestige and visibility. But it's not the only metric. CiteScore, often used by Scopus, is similar but calculates citations over a 3-year period, often covering a broader range of journals. And then there's the H-index, which measures both a researcher's or a journal's productivity and citation impact over time. Now, here's the reality check. Higher metrics mean greater visibility, but they don't automatically mean a better fit for your specific paper. You must consider the journal's scope, its target audience, and its acceptance rates alongside these numbers. Don't chase a number if the journal doesn't actually publish your type of work. So, how do we put all this foundational knowledge into action? Understanding the landscape and the metrics is great, but now we need a plan. Strategic planning is what separates a successful submission from a frustrating rejection. First, you must define your research story in one compelling sentence. If you can't summarize your paper's core contribution simply, your reader won't get it either. Next, identify your target audience and your impact goals. Are you trying to change clinical practice or advance a theoretical concept? That decision guides your journal choice. Crucially, create a realistic timeline. Writing and submission take time, usually 3 to 6 months. Don't forget to develop a backup journal list right now, before you even submit the first time. This saves you valuable time and emotional energy if you face rejection. Finally, align your strategy with your career stage and build momentum. One publication should set up the next. This strategic approach helps us set realistic goals for our first submission. When it comes to selecting a journal, we need to be ambitious, but we also need to be achievable. You need a tiered strategy. The top tier or dream journals, like Nature or Science, have acceptance rates in the single digits. They are high risk, high reward, and you should establish a track record before targeting them. The sweet spot for your first paper is often a reputable field journal with acceptance rates around 20 to 30%. These journals offer solid impact, rigorous review, and a realistic chance of acceptance. Then you need a safety journal, a specialized or backup journal with a higher acceptance rate. This is your strategic safety net to ensure your work gets published. Success in publishing comes from persistence and using this tiered strategy. Start with your dream journal, but be ready to move down the tiers quickly and strategically. Now that we've covered the foundations of journal selection, let's move on to the actual writing process. We spent Module 1 figuring out where we want to publish. Now, in Module 2, we tackle the biggest challenge, writing the manuscript itself. This is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to spend the next 2.5 hours mastering the structure and the writing techniques that turn raw data into a compelling scientific story. We'll break down the universal IMRAD structure and then focus on crafting powerful titles, abstracts, and content for every section. Our goal is simple: to finish this module with a complete, well-written manuscript draft ready for submission. You'll learn to write with clarity and precision, ensuring your message is not lost in translation. This is a learnable skill, and by the end, you'll have the confidence to structure any scientific paper. So let's dive right into the framework that underpins nearly all scientific communication. The IMRAD structure is the universal language of scientific publishing. If you understand this framework, you can read and write any scientific paper. IMRAD stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. Think of it as a logical journey you take the reader on. The introduction answers, why did you do this research? The methods explain, what exactly did you do? The results tell us, what did you find? And finally, the discussion explains, what does it all mean? This structure follows what we call the hourglass pattern. You start broad in the introduction, narrow down to the specific details of your study in the methods and results, and then broaden out again in the discussion to talk about the wider implications. This logical flow is what makes scientific papers so effective. But IMRAD is just the core. There are a few other essential components we need to cover. While IMRAD is the heart of the paper, a complete manuscript has several other essential components that frame your research. These elements are crucial for indexing, discoverability, and first impressions. We start with the title, which must be a concise, informative summary. Then comes the abstract, a short, powerful overview of the entire study, often the only part a reader sees. Don't forget your keywords. These 4 to 6 terms are how databases find your work. After the core IMRAD sections, we often include a conclusion, which summarizes the main takeaways and suggests future directions. And of course, the references, which ground your work in the existing literature. Every single one of these components must be polished because they all contribute to the paper's overall impact and professionalism. Now let's start dissecting the first major section, the introduction. The introduction is your first opportunity to hook the reader, and we use what I call the funnel approach to build it. Think of it as a logical progression from the general to the specific. You start broad by introducing the general research area and establishing context. Then you narrow the focus by reviewing the current knowledge and, critically, identifying the gap your research fills. This leads naturally to stating the problem, what specific question needs answering. Finally, you propose your solution and end with a clear statement of your research question or hypothesis. This funnel structure is powerful because it engages the reader and makes them care about your work. It shows them exactly why your study is necessary and novel. Let's look at the specific keys to making that introduction truly engaging. A strong introduction needs to do 4 things exceptionally well. First, you need a powerful hook. This is a strong statement or observation that immediately establishes the relevance of your work. Second, you must clearly identify the gap. You have to show what is unknown or unresolved in the current literature. This is the space where your research lives. If there's no gap, there's no need for your paper. Third, you must explicitly state the question. Don't make the reader guess your hypothesis. State it clearly and concisely at the end of the introduction. Finally, maintain conciseness. An effective introduction is focused and typically only a few paragraphs long. Your goal is to convince the editor and reviewers that your work is novel and necessary. Once you've successfully framed the problem, we move into the methods section, which is the blueprint for replication. We've talked about setting up your research question in the introduction. Now we move to the methods section, which is truly the blueprint for replication. Think of this as the golden rule of scientific writing. If another researcher can't replicate your study using only this section, your paper is incomplete. We need to provide enough detail for someone to reproduce your work exactly. So, you must detail your study design, whether it was randomized or observational, and clearly define your participants or samples. You need to list specific materials and equipment, including model numbers and software versions. And finally, you must be precise about your statistical analysis. Don't just say you used a t-test, state the specific test, the p-value threshold, and the software package. Precision here is non-negotiable. Now that we know how you did the work, let's look at what you found. So, you've clearly laid out your methods. Now, what did you find? The results section is where you report the objective findings, and this is critical. It's what you found, not what it means. You must save all interpretation for the discussion. Your job here is to present the data in a logical order, which is usually by importance or narrative flow, not the chronological order you did the experiments. Use your text to guide the reader through your figures and tables, but never repeat the data in the text. If it's in the figure, just reference it. Maintain strict objectivity. Avoid subjective language like surprisingly or unfortunately. Just give us the facts. And be rigorous with your statistics. Report exact p-values and confidence intervals. Don't just say there was a significant difference. But how do we actually show this data effectively? The data you've collected is only as good as your ability to communicate it visually. This is where we make data clear and compelling. First, you need to simplify. We want to maximize the data-ink ratio. That means removing all the chart junk, no unnecessary grid lines, no distracting 3D effects, no background colors. Second, label directly. Avoid legends that force the reader's eye to jump back and forth. Put the labels right next to the data lines. Third, your captions must be standalone. A figure legend should explain the main finding without the reader needing to refer back to the main text. The figure should tell a complete story on its own. And finally, maintain consistency. Use the same fonts and color schemes across all your visuals for a professional, unified look. Once we have the data presented clearly, we can finally talk about what it all means. We've moved from the introductions why, through the methods how, and the results what. Now we arrive at the discussion, which is the so what. This is your chance to interpret your findings. You must start by immediately answering the research question you posed in the introduction. Don't make the reader wait. Next, you need to put your work into context. Compare your results with previous literature. Do your findings support, contradict, or extend what's already known? This builds your credibility. You must also acknowledge your limitations honestly. Being transparent about study weaknesses actually builds trust with reviewers. And most importantly, you need to explain the broader impact. What are the theoretical or practical implications of your work? This is how you answer the so what for your field. But before anyone reads your discussion, they see one thing first. Your title is your first impression, and often, it's the only thing people read before deciding to click on your paper. So, it needs to be specific. Identify the exact topic, the scope, and the key variables of your study. Second, be concise. Cut out all the waste words like a study of or investigation into. Every word must earn its place. And third, your title must be searchable. Include the keywords that other researchers will use when they're looking for work like yours in a database. Look at the example. A weak title is vague, but a strong title clearly states the specific outcome, uses active voice, and highlights the key mechanism. A great title is a marketing tool for your research. Now that we've nailed the title, let's move on to the abstract, which is the next most important piece of real estate in your paper. The abstract is arguably the most important 250 words you will write. Why? Because it is the ultimate gatekeeper. If the editor or a potential reviewer doesn't like your abstract, they won't read the rest of your paper. Think of it as the elevator pitch for your entire research project. We use a simple four-part structure to ensure you hit all the necessary points. First, establish the context. Why should anyone care about this problem? Next, briefly describe the methods. What did you actually do? Then, the results. What is the single most important finding? Finally, the conclusion. What does this finding mean for the field? This structure ensures your abstract is self-contained and immediately informative. Make sure you include specific numbers and results, not vague statements. A strong abstract is what gets your paper sent out for peer review. Now, let's look at the different ways journals ask you to format this critical summary. Following up on the structure we just discussed, you need to know which format your target journal prefers. There are two main types, structured and unstructured. Structured abstracts use explicit headings like background, methods, results, and conclusion. These are highly scannable and common in clinical and medical journals where clarity and speed are paramount. They force you to be systematic. Unstructured abstracts are a single, continuous paragraph without internal headings. These are more common in basic sciences and engineering, like nature or science. They allow for a better narrative flow, letting you tell a slightly more flexible story. You must check the journal's author guidelines before you start writing. Submitting the wrong format is a quick way to show the editor you didn't read the instructions. So, always confirm the requirement before you finalize your abstract. This attention to detail is crucial as we move into our next module, which is all about strategic journal selection. We've spent a lot of time perfecting your manuscript, but now we face a critical decision. Where do we send it? Welcome to Module 3, Journal Selection Strategy. This is where we move from writing to strategy. Sending your paper to the wrong journal is the #1 reason for desk rejection. It wastes months of your time. Over the next hour, we'll develop a targeted submission list. We'll learn how to evaluate journals not just by impact factor, but by scope and audience. Your goal is to find the perfect home for your research, maximizing your chances of acceptance and impact. The key outcome here is a prioritized list of journals, ready for submission. We start by looking at the most obvious places to find potential journals. So, where do you even begin to look for a journal? Don't overthink it. Start with the papers you already know and trust. First, look at your own references. The journals you cite most frequently are often the best fit for your work. They publish the research that directly informs your own. Second, use your network. Ask your supervisor and trusted colleagues. They have insider knowledge about which journals are fast, fair, and respected in your niche. This advice is invaluable. Third, use subject databases like Scopus or Web of Science. Search for your specific keywords and see which journals consistently appear at the top of the results. These 3 strategies give you a solid starting list. But we can also use technology to help us narrow the field even further. We live in the age of big data, so let's use it to our advantage. Automated journal finder tools can save you hours of manual searching. These tools work by analyzing your title and abstract, then matching your language to the content of thousands of published articles. For example, Jane, or Journal/Author Name Estimator, is excellent for biomedical fields. It searches PubMed for similar articles and tells you where they were published. Elsevier and Springer also offer their own tools, which are great if you are targeting journals within their publishing houses. These tools are fast and can suggest journals you might never have considered. But remember, these are just suggestions. You still need to manually check the journal's aims and scope. These tools are a great starting point, but they don't replace your critical judgment. Now, let's discuss how to evaluate journal fit beyond just these automated suggestions. We spent time on metrics like impact factor, but now we need to ask the critical question, does this journal actually fit your work? Metrics are only one piece of the puzzle. The first thing you must check is the aims and scope. If your topic is outside their defined focus, you will get an automatic desk rejection, no matter how good your science is. You also need to consider the audience. Are you trying to reach a small group of specialists who will understand every nuance, or a broad, multidisciplinary audience? That choice dictates your writing style and the journal you pick. Finally, consider the practicalities like speed and article type. If you need a publication quickly for a job application, a journal with a 6-month review time is not a good choice. And make sure the journal even publishes your format, whether it is a case study or a review article. So, we've moved beyond just numbers. Now let's use these criteria to build a smart submission strategy. Now that you know how to evaluate a journal's fit, let's build a submission strategy that maximizes your chances of success. You need a tiered approach, not just one target. Think of it like a safety net. Tier 1 is your dream journal, the high-impact, competitive one you are reaching for. It is worth trying, but the rejection risk is high. Tier 2 is your realistic target. This is the journal where your work fits the scope and quality standards perfectly. This is where you have the best chance of acceptance. Tier 3 is your safety journal. This is a solid, respectable journal with a higher acceptance rate that guarantees your work will eventually be published. You submit to Tier 1 first, then move down the list if you are rejected. This strategy ensures you aim high while protecting you from endless rejection cycles. We'll now look at the final checks you need to make before committing to one of these targets. Before you spend hours reformatting your manuscript, you need to make one final, critical decision. You have your tiered list, but which one gets the first submission? You must read 3 to 5 recent articles from your top candidate journals to assess how your work compares in scope and quality. Then, ask yourself these 4 questions. First, is the scope a perfect match? If you have any doubt, choose another journal. Second, will the right audience read it? If you want to influence policy, a highly specialized journal might not be the best choice. Third, weigh speed versus impact. Do you need a quick publication for a career milestone, or can you afford to wait for a higher impact factor? Finally, check the practicalities. Can you afford the article processing charges, or APCs, if you choose an open access option? Once you answer these questions, you can commit to your Tier 1 journal. Now that we've chosen our target, we are ready to move into the submission process itself. We've successfully navigated the complex world of journal selection, and now we're moving into Module 4, the submission process. This module is all about execution. You have a great manuscript and a target journal. Now you need to package it all up professionally. Over the next hour and a half, we will cover the essential components of a submission package, which is more than just the manuscript file. We will focus heavily on writing a compelling cover letter, which is your pitch to the editor. And we will make sure you meet all the technical requirements so you don't get desk rejected for a simple formatting error. The key outcome here is a successful, professional submission that is ready for peer review. Let's start with the essential checklist you need before you even think about clicking submit. Before you click that final submit button, you need to treat your submission as a complete package, not just a single file. A missing component is an easy reason for the editorial office to send your paper back. The manuscript itself must be clean and formatted exactly to the journal's guidelines. This includes line numbers and the correct file type. You also need high-resolution figures and tables saved as separate files, not just embedded in the text. The cover letter is essential. It is your one-page pitch to the editor. Do not forget the title page, which must include all author affiliations and contact details. Finally, you must include all the necessary declarations, like funding sources and conflict of interest statements. If the journal allows, suggesting reviewers can speed up the process, so have those names ready. Make sure you check off every item on this list before you submit. Next, we'll dive into the technical preparation needed to meet those strict journal requirements. We've gathered all the components, but now we need to make sure they fit the box. Technical preparation is where many first-time authors fail, leading to an immediate desk rejection before a reviewer even sees the work. The guide for authors is not a suggestion, it is the rulebook, and you must follow it exactly. This means using the correct font, size, and spacing, and critically, numbering all pages and lines continuously. Why? Because reviewers need to reference specific lines when giving feedback. Also, pay close attention to the citation style. APA is different from Vancouver, and a mismatch here shows the editor you didn't take the time to prepare properly. Finally, respect the limits. If the journal says 5,000 words in 5 figures, don't submit 6,000 words in 6 figures. That's a red flag. Get these technical details right, and you clear the first hurdle. Now let's talk about the visual elements that make your data shine. Your figures and tables are the most important part of your manuscript. They are where your data lives, and they need to be perfect. Remember, resolution is king. Never submit a pixelated screenshot or a low-resolution image. It immediately screams amateur. Aim for at least 300 dpi for all images, and use vector formats like EPS or PDF for graphs whenever possible because they stay crisp no matter how much the editor zooms in. For tables, follow the 3-line rule. Use horizontal lines only at the top, bottom, and under the header row. Avoid vertical lines entirely. Most importantly, every figure and table must be able to stand alone. A reader should understand the data and the methods just by reading the caption, without having to dig through the main text. Getting these visuals right is crucial, but even a perfect manuscript needs a strong introduction. That's where your cover letter comes in. You have a technically perfect manuscript, but now you need to sell it. The cover letter is not a formality, it is your pitch to the editor, and it's the first thing they read. This is your chance to make a strong first impression and convince them that your work is worth sending out for review. Don't just copy your abstract. Instead, focus on 3 things: the hook, the value, and the fit. What is the single most important finding? State it clearly and simply in the first paragraph. Why is this significant? Explain how it advances the field or solves a critical problem. And finally, why this journal? You must connect your work directly to their specific aims and audience. This pitch needs structure, so let's break down the anatomy of a compelling cover letter. The cover letter needs to be tight, professional, and persuasive. Start with the salutation, address a specific editor by name. Never use "Dear Editor" if you can find the editor-in-chief's name. Then comes the hook in the first paragraph. State your main finding and its significance immediately, don't bury the lead. The second paragraph provides context. Briefly explain the background and why this research question is critical right now. The third paragraph is crucial, the fit. Explicitly state why this paper belongs in this specific journal. Reference their scope or a recent paper they published to show you've done your homework. Finally, the closing paragraph handles the declarations. Confirm originality, state that there are no conflicts of interest, and confirm that all authors approved the submission. This structure ensures you hit all the necessary points while keeping the editor engaged. Now let's look at the strategies to make this letter truly persuasive. To make your cover letter persuasive, you need to be strategic. First, tailor it. Never copy-paste a generic letter. Address the editor by name and mention why your work fits their specific readership. This shows respect and preparation. Second, sell it. Focus on the novelty and the impact. Don't just summarize the results section, explain why those results matter to the field. Third, keep it short. Editors are busy people, so your letter must be 1 page maximum, with short paragraphs and clear sentences. Finally, watch your language. Be confident, not arrogant. Instead of saying, "We hope this paper might be of interest," use strong, active language like "We demonstrate for the first time that." Confidence matters, and your tone sets the stage for the entire review process. With a persuasive cover letter ready, we can now move on to the technical process of submitting your manuscript. We've prepared the perfect cover letter. Now, let's talk about the technical hurdle, the online submission system. This process can feel like navigating a bureaucratic maze, but mastering it is essential for a successful submission. Most journals use platforms like Editorial Manager or ScholarOne. Your first step is creating an account and ensuring all author information is correct. Next, you'll upload your files. Remember, the manuscript, figures, and cover letter often need to be separate files. Pay close attention to the metadata section. You must manually input the title, abstract, and keywords. These are crucial for indexing and searchability later on. The most critical step, the one people often rush, is reviewing the generated PDF proof. The system takes your separate files and stitches them together. You must check that figures haven't shifted and that all text is present. If you skip this, you risk reviewers seeing a poorly formatted document. Don't let a technical glitch derail your submission. Once you approve that PDF, you're officially in the system. And that brings us to the next phase, the peer review process. We've successfully submitted the manuscript. Now, we enter what many researchers call the black box of academic publishing, Module 5, the peer review process. This is where your work is scrutinized by experts in your field. It's a critical, often stressful, but ultimately beneficial part of the scientific method. Over the next hour and a half, we'll demystify this process. We'll cover the different models of review, like single-blind and double-blind, and explain the entire editorial workflow. Our goal here is to set realistic expectations. You need to know what happens after you click submit so you can prepare for the outcome, whatever it may be. Understanding the system is the first step to navigating it successfully. Let's start by defining why this gatekeeping mechanism is so vital to science. Why does peer review matter? Think of it as the immune system of academic literature. It's the gatekeeping mechanism that protects the integrity of the scientific record. It's not there to block good science, it's there to filter out flawed science. First, peer review checks for validity. Are your methods sound? Do your conclusions logically follow from your data? This is the core technical check. Second, it assesses originality. Is your work new? Does it build meaningfully on existing knowledge? Reviewers are experts who know the literature inside and out. Finally, they judge significance. Does your work make a substantial contribution to the field? Or is it just a minor, incremental step? The goal is to ensure that anything published is robust, novel, and important. This process is what gives published research its authority. Now, let's look at the different ways this review process can be structured. Peer review isn't a single, monolithic process. It comes in a few different models, each with its own trade-offs. The most traditional is single-blind review. Here, the reviewers know your identity, but you don't know theirs. The advantage is that reviewers can offer honest, critical feedback without fear of professional retaliation. The downside is the potential for bias, whether conscious or unconscious, based on your affiliation or background. Then we have double-blind review. This is designed to reduce bias by making both the author and the reviewers anonymous. The focus is purely on the science, which is a huge plus. However, it can be difficult to fully anonymize a manuscript, especially in niche fields where your references might give you away. Finally, open review is the most transparent model. Everyone's identity is known, and sometimes the reviews themselves are published. This increases accountability, but some reviewers might be hesitant to offer truly critical feedback. You need to check your target journal's policy so you know what to expect. Regardless of the model, your manuscript follows a similar path through the system. Once you submit, your manuscript begins a defined journey through the editorial system. It starts with an administrative check. Journal staff verify that you followed all the formatting rules and that all files are present. They also run plagiarism software. If you fail this, you risk an immediate unsubmission. Next comes the editor assessment. An associate editor or editor-in-chief looks at your paper. They assess its scope, novelty, and overall fit for the journal. If it's clearly out of scope or technically weak, it gets desk rejected right here. If it passes, it moves to the peer review stage. 2 to 4 independent experts evaluate your work. This is where the real scrutiny happens. Finally, the editor makes a decision based on those reviewer reports and their own judgment. This entire process takes time, typically 4 to 8 weeks. Understanding these steps helps you manage your anxiety and track your paper's progress. So, what are the possible outcomes of this journey? So, you've submitted your manuscript and waited patiently. Now the decision is back. What does it mean? After your manuscript completes its journey through the peer review system, the editor makes one of these 5 critical decisions. We're all hoping for that rare accept, but let's be realistic, that's the unicorn of first submissions. It almost never happens. The most common outcomes are minor revisions or major revisions. This is the opportunity you want. It means the editor sees value in your work and is willing to publish it, provided you address the reviewer's concerns. Think of this as the door opening. But remember, reject is also a common outcome. If you get a rejection, it doesn't mean your science is bad. It often means the journal wasn't the right fit or the reviewers found fundamental flaws. The key is to understand which decision you received and what action it demands from you. Now, let's dive into the actual feedback and learn how to interpret those comments. You've got the decision, and now you're staring at pages of reviewer comments. How do you decode this feedback? Reviewers are experts, and they are trying to help you, even if their tone doesn't always feel that way. We need to translate their academic language into actionable steps. For example, when a reviewer says your methodology is unclear, they aren't just being picky. They are telling you they cannot reproduce your experiment based on your text. That's a serious reproducibility issue you must fix with specific details. If they say your discussion is speculative, you're overclaiming. You need to pull back and stick strictly to what your data proves. And if they claim the novelty is limited, you've failed to put your work in context. You must explicitly highlight the gap you are filling and why your work matters. Understanding this translation is the first step to a successful revision. Let's look even deeper at the subtext of their comments. Building on that translation, we need to read between the lines because the tone of a review can be misleading. Reviewers are often rushed, and sometimes they are frustrated, but you must look past the tone to find the truth. If a reviewer says they didn't understand a section, don't blame their intelligence. It means your writing was unclear. Confusion equals unclear writing, and you need to rewrite for clarity. Another common comment is asking for impossible amounts of new data. When they do this, they are often signaling that your current evidence is too weak to support your bold conclusions. The fix isn't always more experiments, it's often toning down your claims. Finally, remember that a long, critical review is actually a good sign. It means the reviewer engaged deeply with your work. Silence or a vague rejection is much worse. This constructive criticism is a gift. Now that we know how to interpret the feedback, we can move into the most critical phase, responding to it. We've spent time understanding the peer review process and learning how to interpret the feedback we receive. Now we transition into Module 6, which is all about the strategic response. This is where you take control of the narrative. The response letter you write is just as important as the revised manuscript itself. Over the next 2 hours, we'll focus on turning the critique into acceptance. We'll cover how to structure a response letter that wins over the editor, how to strategically revise your manuscript, and perhaps the trickiest part, how to handle those conflicting comments when reviewers disagree with each other. The key outcome here is learning how to successfully navigate the revision and resubmission process. Let's start with the mindset you need for writing that response letter. Your response letter is your chance to demonstrate that you are a professional, engaged researcher who takes feedback seriously. This letter is your pitch to the editor, showing why your revised paper deserves publication. The mindset here is crucial. Adopt a tone of gratitude and professionalism. Never, ever get defensive, even if a comment feels unfair. Treat the feedback as free consulting to improve your work. The method for success is systematic. You must address every single point raised by every reviewer. Do not skip a single comment. We recommend an interleaved format. Copy the reviewer comment, then provide your response, and then show the evidence. You need to make it effortless for the editor to verify your changes. Don't just say you fixed it, show exactly where, using page and line numbers, and quote the new text. This golden rule, making it easy for the editor to accept your paper, is what separates successful resubmissions from rejections. Next, we'll break down the exact structure of this critical response letter. The response letter is your chance to prove you took the feedback seriously and improved your work. This isn't just a formality, it's a strategic document that can determine your paper's fate. We need to organize this response for maximum impact, making the editor's job easy. Start with a professional opening, thanking the editor and reviewers for their time and constructive comments. Then, give a brief summary of the major changes you made. This immediately frames your revision positively. The body is where you address every single comment. The best practice is to copy the reviewer's comment verbatim, then immediately follow with your detailed response. This interleaved format is crucial because it ensures the editor can quickly verify that you haven't missed anything. Finally, close by reiterating your confidence that the manuscript is now stronger and ready for publication. A well-structured response letter shows respect, professionalism, and thoroughness. Now let's dive into how to handle those really tough, fundamental concerns. Now we tackle the big stuff, the major revisions that challenge the very foundation of your paper. These are the deal breakers, and you can't just talk your way out of them. If a reviewer asks for a new experiment or a missing control, you need to do it. This is the most direct way to address a validity concern. If the new data supports your original claim, your paper becomes much stronger. If they question your statistics, you must rerun the analysis. You can even present both your original and the reviewer's suggested analysis to show the robustness of your findings. But what if you simply cannot do the experiment? Maybe the equipment is broken or the reagents are gone. In that case, you must be honest. Admit the limitation, explain why you can't perform the experiment, and strategically move that point into the discussion section as a direction for future research. This shows you acknowledge the gap without derailing your current submission. Next, we'll look at the smaller, easier fixes. After dealing with the major concerns, we move on to the small issues and suggestions. Don't underestimate these. Addressing every minor point shows the editor you are detail-oriented and cooperative. These are your easy wins. If a reviewer points out a typo, a grammar mistake, or a formatting issue, just fix it immediately. Don't waste time arguing over personal preferences. If a reviewer prefers one word over another, change it. You need to save your energy and your political capital for the scientific disagreements. I call this the 5-minute rule. If a suggestion takes less than 5 minutes to address and doesn't hurt your paper, just do it. It's the fastest, most efficient path to getting your paper accepted. Remember, you want the editor to see you as a partner in the publication process, not an adversary. But what happens when you fundamentally disagree with a reviewer's scientific point? We'll cover that next. It's a common misconception that you must agree with every single reviewer comment. You don't. You are the expert on your specific study, and if a reviewer asks for something scientifically unsound or outside the scope of your work, you have a duty to stand your ground. The key is to do it respectfully. Never be defensive or dismissive. Use the rebuttal formula. First, acknowledge the reviewer's suggestion. Say something like, "We appreciate the reviewer's insightful suggestion to expand the dataset." Second, pivot with a polite however. Explain why you didn't make the change. Third, and most importantly, provide evidence. Back up your refusal with clear scientific justification, referencing your data or similar published studies. The editor will then weigh your professional, evidence-based response against the reviewer's comment. Your tone matters more than anything here. Now that we know how to handle disagreements, let's talk about the actual process of revising the manuscript itself. A systematic revision saves time and prevents errors. Start by grouping reviewer comments into themes, then address major experimental or data changes first. Once the hard work is done, finish with a total consistency check to ensure your data matches your narrative across the entire document. Next, we'll discuss the technical requirements for your submission package, including track changes. The way you present your revision can influence the editor's decision. Submit an interleaved response letter to address every comment, a marked-up version with track changes for transparency, and a clean version ready for print. Clear file names are essential to prevent confusion in the editorial office. Before you hit send, let's review a few common mistakes that can sink a perfect revision. Knowing what not to do is vital. Never ignore a reviewer's comment. Address every point diplomatically, even if you disagree. Avoid overcorrecting sections that were already accepted, as this risks introducing new errors. Finally, ensure your revised manuscript is flawlessly proofread. Sloppiness at this stage is fatal. Now, let's move into Module 7 to discuss how to handle a rejection head-on. While we aim for acceptance, handling rejection is just as critical. In this module, you'll learn to process setbacks emotionally and plan your next move strategically. The goal is persistence, learning that a rejection is simply a pivot point on the way to publication. Let's begin by looking at the numbers and the reality of the process. Rejection is the norm, not the exception. Top-tier journals reject over 90% of submissions, and even Nobel-winning work like the Krebs cycle and the Higgs boson was initially turned away. A rejection is often a reflection of a journal's current needs or scope, not your worth as a scientist. Resilience starts with accepting this reality. Now, let's break down the actual reasons manuscripts get turned away. Analyze your rejection feedback objectively. Was the paper out of scope for the journal, or did it lack the novelty the editors require? Perhaps the reviewers identified methodological flaws or found the writing too disorganized to follow. Regardless of the reason, use this information as a roadmap for improvement. Before we fix the paper, however, let's discuss how to handle the initial sting of the rejection letter. Processing rejection is part of the job. Read the letter, then walk away for at least 24 hours to let the emotions settle. Taking this distance prevents defensive reactions and allows you to return to the comments with a clear, professional mindset. Once the sting has faded, you'll be ready to evaluate the feedback as a scientist rather than a critic. To fix a rejection, you must first diagnose it. If the issue is a scientific flaw, go back to the data. If it's a scope mismatch, pivot to a more specialized journal. If it's a communication failure, focus on a strategic rewrite. Identifying the root cause ensures you don't waste time on the wrong solution. Let's look at the criteria for trying the same journal again versus moving forward. Should you try the same journal again? Only if the editor explicitly invited a resubmission, the flaws are fixable, or a reviewer objectively misunderstood a fact. However, if the rejection was based on lack of novelty or out of scope, it's time to move on. Don't argue against subjective decisions, pivot to a better fit. Let's discuss when moving on is the right choice. When a journal isn't the right fit or the reviewer's demands are impossible to meet, pivot. Moving to a more specialized or appropriate impact journal is often faster and more successful than fighting a rejection. Take the lessons learned and move forward. Here is how to handle that next submission. Don't let a rejected manuscript sit. Once you've cooled down, select a new target and reformat the paper to their guidelines. Use the previous reviewer's feedback to strengthen the manuscript before sending it out again. Craft a new cover letter specific to the new journal, ensuring a clean, professional start. Now, let's talk about what happens when you finally get that acceptance letter. Acceptance is a huge win, but the journey isn't over. To ensure your paper is published quickly and correctly, you must navigate the production workflow and then shift your focus to promotion. This is where you maximize your impact. Let's explore the steps that turn your hard work into a high-visibility publication. The production phase turns your draft into a polished article. It involves professional copy editing for clarity, a final review of the galley proofs by you, and finally, official online publication with a DOI. Now, let's focus on the most critical part of this phase, the proof review. Treat the proof as your final 48-hour quality check. Verify author metadata, grant numbers, and technical symbols like Greek letters. Ensure all figures match their captions and are high resolution. Catching errors now avoids embarrassing corrections later. Congratulations! Your paper has passed the gauntlet of peer review and is now a permanent contribution to your field. This publication is vital career currency that validates your expertise and opens new professional doors. Now that it's official, let's ensure your work gets the audience it deserves. Published is only half the battle. Now you must ensure your work is read. Share your findings in plain language on social media and ensure your paper is visible on platforms like ResearchGate. For higher impact, contact your university's media office for a press release. Finally, reach out directly to the experts you cited. A polite email with your PDF is an excellent way to build your professional network. Beyond publishing, build your identity, use an ORCID ID, maintain a Google Scholar profile, and keep your name format consistent. Network with a clear elevator pitch and start co-reviewing manuscripts to learn the editorial side of science. Now, let's look at planning your long-term research career. A sustainable career requires balancing ambition with reality. Build a foundation of regular, solid papers to protect your reputation and secure funding. Every few years, take a moonshot, a high-risk project that could transform your field. Finally, consolidate your expertise by writing review articles. This strategic planning is the key to long-term success. To succeed, you must master the story by turning data into a narrative. Target journals strategically to ensure a good fit and embrace revisions as a way to polish your work. Above all, persist. Rejection is just part of the process. Stay resilient and keep moving forward, but be mindful of the ethical pitfalls along the way. Protect your reputation by avoiding unethical practices. Don't salami slice your data, never self-plagiarize, and steer clear of predatory journals. Most importantly, ensure authorship is earned, not gifted. Now, let's look at the resources available to help you navigate these challenges. Support is all around you. Your university librarians and writing centers offer expert guidance and editing services. Digitally, tools like Zotero and Jane simplify citations and journal selection. Finally, for mastering the craft, I highly recommend Joshua Schimmel's Writing Science. Use these resources to streamline your journey. Now it's time to act. Start by auditing your data to reveal your story's narrative. Next, select your target journal immediately to ensure a perfect fit. Outline your key findings and get mentor sign-off before you dive into the text. Finally, set a 1-hour timer to draft your methods section without self-censoring. These steps turn a massive project into a clear, strategic path forward. Your research is your voice in the scientific conversation. Don't let fear hold you back. You have the strategy and my ongoing support. You're ready for this milestone. It's time to share your work with the world. I'm here to help you clear any hurdles. If you have questions about the strategies or material, please reach out. Your success is my success, and I can't wait to see your work in print. Thank you for dedicating 10 hours to mastering your first manuscript. You now possess the tools, knowledge, and support to navigate the entire publication journey. The world is waiting for your work. Go publish with confidence.